You know what's interesting? Avoidants never chase control directly. They subtly manipulate your emotions. They keep you close enough so you don't leave, but far enough that you're always chasing them. But then something happens. You stop explaining. You stop texting. You stop showing up for a connection they never truly committed to. And that, right there, is when the avoidant starts to panic. Not because they miss you in the way you deserved to be missed, but because they just lost their power. This is what avoidants do when they can't control you anymore. They test your silence. They may breadcrumb, send a, "Hey stranger," text. They'll start posting things online just for your attention. Suddenly, they want to talk, but not to take accountability, just to see if you'll bite. They don't want you back. They want their emotional power back. Here's the truth. The moment you stop dancing in their storm, you become the storm. You flip the dynamic. You went from anxious to anchored, from reactive to unbothered. And nothing confuses an avoidant more than your peace, because they built the connection around your pain. But now you've made a choice. You're no longer controlled by someone who only loved you when it was convenient. You've reclaimed your dignity. And in doing that, you've already won. Avoidants don't chase people. They chase emotional control. That might sound harsh, but it's true once you understand how the avoidant attachment style works. These individuals are not driven by the desire to get close in the way secure people are. They don't crave deep emotional intimacy, even if they pretend to at times. Instead, what they crave is control over the level of closeness. They want you just close enough to feel wanted, but never so close that they feel vulnerable. It's not always intentional or malicious. It's just the emotional blueprint they've learned to survive with. When they first meet someone, avoidants can be incredibly charming. They'll show up strong, make you feel special, spark deep conversations, and give you just enough attention to get you emotionally invested. But as soon as they sense that your feelings are deepening, they begin to back off. Not because they don't like you, but because they fear the intimacy that follows the emotional closeness. It threatens their sense of independence and control. So what do? They pull away. They stop responding the same way. Their energy shifts, and suddenly you're left wondering what you did wrong. That confusion you feel, that's part of the dynamic. The avoidant controls the pace. They set the emotional thermostat of the relationship. They pull you in when they want connection and push you away when it feels overwhelming. And if you're someone with an anxious or deeply empathetic nature, you'll likely try harder to win them back, to prove your worth, to earn consistency from someone who never planned to give it. That's when the power dynamic kicks in. You get stuck in a cycle where they regulate your access to love and affection, and you keep trying to fix it, trying to fix them. But that's not connection. That's control. The avoidant gets their validation not from offering love, but from watching your reaction, your confusion, your pain, your need for clarity. It all feeds their sense of power. Because in that moment, they don't have to open up. They don't have to be vulnerable. They don't have to take emotional risks. They simply have to exist while you do the work to maintain the bond. That's the power imbalance. They feel safe while you feel uncertain. And the more you lean in, the more they pull away, creating a tension that keeps you emotionally hooked. It's a form of emotional control disguised as independence. This is why avoidants don't necessarily chase the person. They chase the ability to regulate how much connection they allow, how much vulnerability they share, and how emotionally safe they feel. When you're under their influence, it's not about how much they love you. It's about how well they can keep you close without letting you in. They want the benefits of being wanted without the responsibilities of emotional intimacy. And as long as they can keep that balance, they feel in control. When you stop reacting, they lose their grip. Avoidants operate in a space where they feel most powerful when you're emotionally triggered. Your reactions, your texts, your calls, your emotional responses are proof that they still have a certain hold on you. They don't need to be close. They just need to know that you're still emotionally available. As long as you're chasing them, questioning them, trying to fix things or get clarity, they remain in control. But the moment you stop reacting, when you go silent, calm, detached, that's when the entire dynamic shifts. That's when the power balance they've relied on starts to crack. Avoidants aren't necessarily cruel people. They often act from a place of fear of intimacy, fear of vulnerability, fear of losing their independence. But they're also deeply skilled at managing emotional distance. They know how to say just enough to keep you holding on, even while they're not giving you what you truly need. And they rely on your emotional investment to keep that cycle going. So when you respond emotionally, when you cry, when you ask why, when you plead or even get angry, it reassures them that they still matter to you. Your reaction becomes their proof of relevance. Even your pain in their world equals connection. That's why your silence is so powerful. When you stop reacting, you're no longer playing the role they've unconsciously assigned you, the one who overfunctions emotionally. You're no longer filling in the blanks they left empty. You're no longer participating in the back and forth that kept them feeling secure in their emotional distance. And that's not just confusing for them, it's terrifying. It forces them to face the very feelings they've been trying to avoid, because now you're not demanding closeness or connection, you're just gone. Not physically, maybe, but emotionally. And to the avoidant, that feels like losing their anchor. They don't understand this kind of silence. Avoidants are used to people chasing after them, trying to prove their worth. But when you withdraw with dignity, when your absence speaks louder than any angry text ever could, they feel a different kind of discomfort, one they can't control, one they can't explain, one they can't soothe through surface-level communication. It challenges the very structure of how they navigate relationships. Because now, they're not the ones pulling away. You are. You've taken back the power they never expected to lose, and the quiet strength in your detachment becomes louder than anything you ever said in words. Your lack of reaction forces them into a space they avoid at all costs reflection. Now they have to think. They have to question. They have to wonder. Why did they stop? Did I push too far? Are they really gone? These questions echo louder than your pleas ever did, and in many cases, it's the only thing that ever truly wakes them up, not because they suddenly become emotionally available, but because they're shaken by the loss of control. That's what breaks their grip. Not your tears, not your arguments, not your explanations, your calm, your distance, your silence. They may try to reconnect, not for love, but to regain control. After you stop reacting and begin to detach emotionally, the avoidant starts to notice your absence in a way they didn't expect. It's not your love they miss at first. It's the sense of power they held over your emotions. They begin to realize that their usual tactics no longer work. You're not chasing. You're not reaching out. You're not playing the emotional tug of war anymore. That's when they start testing the waters again, not with full vulnerability, but with calculated moves that help them feel back in control. This is when you might receive a random text like, "Hey," or "Hope you're doing okay." It seems casual, almost innocent, but it's strategic. It's not a message meant to rebuild something real. It's meant to see if they still matter to you. They're not checking in because they're ready to meet your emotional needs. They're checking in because they need reassurance that they haven't lost all access to you. These messages are often vague and non-committal, carefully designed to provoke a response without making them emotionally exposed. If you reply, even just to be polite, they feel like they've regained a piece of the power they lost when you walked away. Avoidants are deeply uncomfortable with emotional intimacy, but they're even more uncomfortable with feeling abandoned. So when they sense that you've truly detached, they panic, not because they're ready to build something secure with you, but because they fear losing the person who once gave them a steady supply of emotional attention. Reaching out becomes a way to test your boundaries. They might compliment you, ask how you've been, or even hint at missing you, but it's rarely followed by accountability or clear effort to change. Instead, it's a breadcrumb, a small piece of attention thrown your way to see if you'll follow the trail back. These reconnections often lack clarity. They'll say things that make you question their intentions, such as, "I've been thinking about you," or "You crossed my mind the other day." But when you try to dig deeper or ask what they actually want, they might deflect or change the subject. That's because they're not ready for real closeness. They're reaching out not to rebuild the relationship, but to soothe the fear of losing control over someone who once cared deeply for them. It's more about settling their anxiety than resolving the past. What's most important to understand is their attempt to reconnect is often not a sign of emotional growth. It's a reflex to your emotional withdrawal. It's an attempt to re-establish the emotional dynamic where they felt in charge and you were always available. If you respond the way you used to, by giving too much, they'll slip right back into their old behavior. But if you remain grounded and aware, you'll see their reach out for what it is. Not love, but control masters care. Your peace confuses them because it breaks the dynamic they depended on. For avoidants, relationships are often built on a silent expectation. They lead, they set the pace, and you adapt. They're used to being the emotionally unavailable one, while the other person compensates by being more available, more forgiving, more emotionally invested. It's a pattern where they pull away and you come closer. They stay distant and you try harder. This emotional dance creates a dynamic that over time makes the avoidant feel safe and in control. But the moment you stop participating in that pattern, when you stop over-explaining, over-giving, over-functioning, they don't know how to respond. Your peace becomes disorienting. To someone with an avoidant attachment style, emotional calmness can be interpreted as disconnection. They've come to expect high emotion as a sign that someone cares. When you were anxious, expressive, or even angry, it reassured them that you were still engaged. Your emotional reactions gave them proof that they still mattered, even if they weren't showing up for you fully. But now, you're no longer explaining your worth. You're no longer waiting for a response. You're not seeking validation. And that level of peace, of being centered and emotionally detached, throws them off completely. Avoidants often interpret your silence or inner calm as coldness. They may even label you as selfish or changed, not realizing that you haven't changed. You've healed. They were comfortable with your emotional availability, even if they never fully met you there. But now, your stillness exposes their emotional gaps. The power dynamic they relied on is broken. You're no longer chasing. You're no longer reacting. You're not trying to fix or decode them. And that unsettles them more than any argument ever could. Peace feels foreign to an avoidant. Many have built emotional walls for so long that chaos feels more familiar than connection. When things are calm, they don't know what to do with it. They might try to stir things up again just to recreate the emotional tension they're used to. They might test you, withdraw again, or throw subtle emotional bait to pull you back into the dynamic. But your peace, when it's real, doesn't flinch. It doesn't need to react. And that's the part they don't know how to control. They've counted on your emotional availability for so long that they never considered what would happen if you simply stopped offering it. They expected your heart to be open forever. They assumed your love would always be loud, always be forgiving, always be willing to try again. But now it's quiet, now it's calm, and that calmness feels like distance, like rejection, like the end. But it's not bitterness, it's not punishment, it's simply self-respect. You're no longer driven by the need to fix or prove anything. And for the avoidant, that kind of energy is unfamiliar, unreadable. Your peace is not just your healing, it's the evidence that they no longer have emotional power over you. And to someone who was addicted to that power, nothing is more confusing or threatening than your quiet detachment. Walking away with dignity is your greatest power. In a dynamic with an avoidant, you may have spent a long time feeling like your love was being measured, tested, or withheld. You gave more than you received. You explained your feelings, justified your reactions, and tried to create a safe emotional space for both of you, only to be met with silence, confusion,